my father graduated from Linfield College here in McMinnville, nearby, and his first job um, out of Linfield was head basketball coach at Myrtle Creek High School and head track coach. He participated in both track and basketball at Linfield, and wanted to stay in education and coaching, and he just loved it. And so we trekked down to Myrtle Creek, which was a small town. I think it was 2,800 people. But it was his first job, and he was excited. And it's one of those things where we just melted into the community, loved it. I was exposed to all sports very early, and especially because my dad was a coach, I went to most of his games, his varsity basketball games. And I think I started out on the bench as a water boy, towel boy, sixth grade, and I think fifth grade, fifth, sixth, seventh grade. So I heard the locker room speeches. I saw the practices often, and so sports was just ingrained at a very early age, and so I loved it, and couldn't wait to participate at a higher level. But in those days, we had to wait till the seventh grade to participate in sports. Nowadays, kids at fourth, fifth grades can jump in and start playing soccer, basketball, or whatever. So.
Um, and what was high school athletics like for you?
High school was interesting in the sense that my freshman and sophomore years, I was at Myrtle Creek High School, and then my dad transferred to McMinnville, the bigger school and more metropolitan area. And so I moved to McMinnville and changed schools in the middle of my high school career, athletically and academically, and so it was a tough transition. The thing that really made it easy, however, was the fact that I went out for basketball, cross country, and baseball, and I made the friends through sports. Had I not done that, I think it would have been a really tough transfer. But made some really good friends that are still friends today, and I had an average basketball career my junior year, and then happened to, well, actually grew from 5'9" to 6'1" my senior year. And that made all the difference. For the college coaches started taking note of my senior season, and as a result had some offers to play college ball.
All right, and tell me about college ball. I know you played at Oregon. Tell me the story of getting
Um,
into Oregon and playing for your coach there.
Yeah, the University of Oregon at the time was not, it's not anywhere where it is today in terms of athletic success, but it's really where I always wanted to go to college. Southern Oregon to up to Eugene was only an hour and a half drive. My dad was a track coach, so we came up to the University of Oregon often and watched track meets, and I was always exposed to Eugene because the state A1 basketball tournament was there. So we started going to that in the fifth, sixth grade, watching high school teams. So my desire was to go to University of Oregon, but I didn't have an offer initially. So I was going to stay right local in McMinnville and go to Linfield, and then at the last moment had an offer to go to University of Oregon, and so became a Duck, and really, really enjoyed the time there. We had average teams, but at the same time, my senior year, we had a winning season, and we won the Far West Classic, which was the top Christmas classic in America at the time. Indiana was there, North Carolina was there. All the top teams would show up in Portland, Oregon. And that was kind of a breakthrough for the University of Oregon because Oregon State had won the tournament like 12 years in a row prior. And so that exposure, and then exposure to Pac 8 on TV, enabled me to get a little bit more exposure out there. And I was drafted by the Phoenix Suns. Tried out. I knew I wasn't going to make it because I had the military out there, but at the same time, I realized I wasn't an NBA ball player at the time, too. So I actually left camp at Fort Lewis in the summer to go down to Phoenix to try out for 10 days and return back to camp. And so that was that was quite a transition, going from BOQs and shaved heads and PT and all that down to Phoenix. It was like a holiday, but at the same time, I knew I was going back.
And tell me about
Yeah.
how you got into the Army. It was a
Well,
popular war, and I'm sure
yeah.
you're not anxious to go
No,
into the Army.
and I was at a very liberal school. In fact, they, right after I left, graduated in 1970, I think, the students there bombed the ROTC department. And so I was not in favor of the war, but I didn't really understand it. And I think a lot of people didn't understand it. And we found out later that it was a major mistake. And I enlisted in ROTC and I didn't go to drill my sophomore year, and you had to wear a uniform on campus, and I got kicked out of the ROTC department. The colonel there, Colonel Fossum, who was a tremendous person, he called me back in and he said, "Rick," he said, "we want college graduates to be officers in the military. I'm going to give you a chance to come back in. Would you take it?" And I hesitated some, but at the same time, I said, "Well, if I don't have to go to drill all the time on campus and wear a uniform, I think I'd be interested." And it worked out, and I stayed. So I entered the Army as a second lieutenant. Ended up in the artillery division, Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and a Fort Observer by training. Fortunately, I didn't have to go to Vietnam. I would have had a hard time with that decision. But
So let's jump up to that fateful conversation that you had at the end of your Army basketball camp that first exposed you to handball.
yeah,
How did that evolve?
well, the one thing that I thought would that I wanted to pursue in the Army was to make the All-Army basketball team, because I thought in a way that might keep me out of Vietnam. And especially after going through artillery training and being a Fort Observer, I knew I didn't like that duty. And so I practiced very hard, got invited to the camp out at Presidio in San Francisco. There was over 60 guys that showed up. They all played college basketball. And the coach at the time, Hal Fisher, said, "I'm going to take the 12 guys out of this camp that can survive." He said, "This is going to be a very vicious and very tough camp." And I survived. I actually made the All-Army team, and then but the team was going on to the international games in Iran, and it was the international military games. So they brought in a couple of guys from the Air Force and one from the Navy, so they had to cut three. So I was one of 12, and then three of us were released, and I basically I was released. The coach met with me. He said, "You know, you hustled more than anybody here, and I really appreciate that, but I've got to cut you. But I'm going to send you, and I've got a flight tonight. It's a midnight flight, all night to Fort Bragg, South Carolina." He said, "There's a new sport in the Army. It's called team handball. And based on what I saw from you, I think you're going to really fit in there well." So he says, "You can go, be my guest, take off tonight, or if you want, you can go home to McMinnville, take a week off, and then you go back to Fort Sill and go from there." Well, had I chosen to go home for a week and back to Fort Sill, I was off to Vietnam because I was on orders for Vietnam at the time. So I went out to Fort Bragg, South Carolina. That was the first official Army tryout camp. Dennis Burkholz was running it, and I just was very fortunate to be picked as one of 7 out of that camp that were basically protected, and we were stationed in Fort Dix, New Jersey, and we were then on a training team for the 1972 Olympics, which at the time when I went out to the camp, I had no idea that this was an Olympic training camp. So it was a tremendous thrill to be picked as one of 7.
Let's go back to when you first walk into the gym at Fort Bragg.
Yep.
Tell me what you knew of the sport going in, and then tell me what your first impressions actually seeing it were.
Well, the coach, Mr. Fisher, all he told me was it's a new sport that General Westmoreland really was promoting in the military. And they had contacted him because they knew that he had a group of athletes out trying out for All Army. The only thing he told me was the sport looks like water polo. But he said it's played on a gym floor. So I couldn't imagine. I had no idea what it was all about. And I did, the first day there, you could see exactly what he was saying. I mean, it's basically soccer but throwing the ball. And I looked around, and there were 60, 70 guys there that were college basketball players, and that seemed to be maybe the easiest transition, basketball to handball. Although there's a couple of the guys that end up making our team were baseball players because they had great arms, accurate arms, could throw the ball. But you throw the ball into a goal, and you play it on a basketball floor. And so I looked at it and I said, that actually looks like a lot of fun. And it turned out to be just a fun 2 weeks at this camp because it was a new game. Everybody enjoyed it. We knew that it was either that or back to the barracks and play Army games, and we really didn't enjoy that. So it was good duty. And so, but early on, I remember a guy by the name of Tom Hardiman. We're over at the club having dinner, and he's going, we have a potential to be in the 72 Olympics. And I didn't know that going in, but once I was there 3-4 days, you kind of realize that this is really special. If this ever happened, it would be unbelievable.
And tell me about the first trips that you took. How did the team do? I mean, I kind of know what the story is, but tell me how you incrementally got better.
Yeah. The first trips were so humbling, and yet we had fun. We're in the military, and we're traveling. We're staying in nice hotels. Compliments of staying with being hosted by different countries, different teams, treated well. So it's a good time, but at the same time, it was a very, very humbling because we were getting beat by teams that, in many cases, they were second and third division club teams. The individuals weren't even close to us athletically, but they'd play the game all their life, and they knew how to play, they knew how to win, and they knew the intricacies of the game, how to win. And so we probably for 6 months played teams we didn't end up playing national teams initially. We played, like I say, club teams, and we got hammered. But we got better every trip, and that. We just continued to improve. And initially, I remember one of the first games was in Luxembourg. We played a really good club team in Luxembourg, and we got beat right at the end. So we had a fairly good initial game in Europe, but we were really down, and in the locker room afterwards, and I would have to say by the end of the trip, nobody was down after a loss. We just said, okay, we lost, but we're going to get better. We're going to move on, you see. And I think that attitude really saved us and saved some of the guys from not just packing it in and leaving, Yeah.
What was it like to be part of this team as you were, not divorcing the games, but you're developing a chemistry, you're developing friendships. What are your memories of the socialization process that you went through?
Well, the one reason, I think, one of the major reasons that we were a pretty successful team is that we were better friends off the court than we were on court, probably. I mean, we really bonded. We really became great friends. You spend so much time on trains, buses, traveling, dinners, celebrations after games, and we all had a lot in common because we were in the military, most of us, and we knew that we had really good duty where we were at the time, and we were very appreciative and fortunate to be where we were. And so there's a bond there that exists today, and we're just, I can call up anybody on our team, and maybe I haven't talked to him for a year, but it's just like we visited yesterday. It's just, you just don't miss a beat. We're just, it was really a close-knit team.
Let's talk about Olympic qualifications in Elkhart. I assume by February of 1972, you've played a few national teams. Now you're feeling your oats a little bit and becoming the team that you were destined to become. Walk me through the games that you played there and any memories that you have of either of games or celebrations or anything that you can recall.
Yeah. Well, Mexico wasn't very good, and so that was an easy win, and we knew it would be. They, and so you move on. We played Argentina. Decent game. They play down there. I mean, they play a lot more than we play in the United States, primarily because it's a big soccer country, and handball and soccer are so much alike, except that handball's playing indoors and you throw it rather than kick it. But most athletes in the foreign countries that we played all played handball at a very early age as well as soccer. So Argentina was a good game. We won that. I don't remember the score, but it wasn't a big celebration, that's for sure. We thought we'd beat them. But when we got to Canada, we played a couple practice games with them, club teams. And Canada, they have a pretty good program up there. They have a lot of Europeans, especially Quebec, where you have the French influence. And so the players we were playing against Canada, most of them had been playing for 10, 12 years. So they had a huge advantage. They knew how to play the game. They had been exposed to the game. They had good coaching over the years. So I would say we were not necessarily favored. We had better athletes. But that game was a really close game. And it was for all the marbles. It was to qualify to go to Munich. And we win by a close margin at the end. It was, as I said, it was close all the way. And the celebration afterwards was probably second only to our celebration after we beat Spain in Munich. Of all the games we played, that would have to be right there, almost at the same level as beating Spain. Because, when you look back and you go, gee, just a year ago, we didn't even know how to play the game. And now we're going to be in Munich playing against the top 10 teams in the world, 10, 12 teams in the world. And that is just, it's like, it was a dream. And Tom Hardiman, I think I mentioned in Fort Bragg, we're sitting around talking about the possibility of going to Munich. And Tom Hardiman says, I think I'm going to start taking notes. I think the perfect book is to call this From October to Munich. And I wished he had. None of us took notes, and we should have had a diary, because the Canada game was a great game. Great win.
Tell me about the second half of that game, because I know Terry Tinkle came in and hit some key goals. Were you hurt?
I was hurt.
You were hurt.
Yeah. I went out with a head injury. I got back in, but Terry was very instrumental in us winning that game and him qualifying. I think he came in and threw in 3 quick goals. He's big, he's strong. He had an accurate arm, and it was fortunate that that we brought him in when we did.
What's your understanding of why he didn't go on with the team after the Olympics? After qualifications?
He'll tell you his story. The only story that I remember him coming over and talking to me about before going in. I was lieutenant in charge.
Watch your foot. Either.
I was a lieutenant in charge of the group, and he came over and talked to me one-on-one. And I remember him saying that he was just fed up with the military, and he was tired of handball and just wanted to go home. And I think it's a decision he probably regretted to this day, because he would have definitely been a major player on our team in Munich. But it was possible to get burnt out. I mean, we went to Europe frequently, a lot of travel. We had daily doubles at times. We were expected to run on the days that we had off, which is fine. But it was a grind, but the military is a grind. You know, there's a lot of things that are the grind out there, you know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you qualify. You are on your way to Munich, and there was probably a moment where you kind of went, "Oh shit! Now we got to play the best teams
Yeah.
in the world."
Yeah.
Tell me about your training regimen, your progress between Elkhart and Munich.
Well, Elkhart to Munich, we went to Iceland a couple times. Iceland had at the time the number 11 team ranked team in the world, and they were good. We played them several games, and it was easy to get there. It was a quick flight from New York, 5 hours, whatever it was, and the Icelandic Federation welcomed us. So we were probably there twice, and then stopped a couple times in addition, going on to Europe or coming back. So we played them, practiced with them, always inching up, always getting better. We finally beat them, but it took quite a while to get to that level. But you learn so much every game. You learn by your mistakes. And so Iceland was very instrumental in our training. And then Scandinavia a couple trips, Germany a couple trips, and I think the big trip without question, Romania was world champions at the time. And they invited us as we were guests of the Romania Handball Federation for 2 weeks. And this was just a month prior to the games. And when you think about it, it's surprising that they would invite a team that wasn't even ranked at the time. But we came in and scrimmaged with them and against them. And so that 2 weeks that we spent together, and again, this is just 2-3 weeks before Munich, we improved significantly. And part of it was the training that we went through with them. We picked up a lot. And I mentioned this to several of the guys. In my mind, after Romania, I felt we could play competitively with anybody, any team in the world. And we weren't going to beat most teams, but we could hang with them. And so the training was 6 months from Elkhart on to Munich, and there were probably 6-7 trips to Europe. Then we'd come back, take what we learned, and practice in the New York area.
What was life like for you? You were part of the group living in the house, right?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, that's right. You
Yeah,
were.
I was an officer still. I would JR, I, and myself and Harry Winkler were still in the military, and so we lived over on Fort Hamilton in Brooklyn. But we got to the house all the time. The house was fun.
Tell me about the house.
324 Chestnut.
Right.
You'll
Tell
never,
me about
never
that.
forget.
I'm going there, by the way. So
324 Chestnut. Great times. Well, it's just like a fraternity. I mean, it's like a fraternity party every night. Now, I'm not saying it's a crazy, wild drunk thing, no. But it was a camaraderie. We would cook. We would invite neighbors. We'd go into the bars and invite girls to come over, and we'd just have a party, probably every Friday night. But it was, you had to have something like that, because socially, in the military, you don't get that exposure very often. We over in the barracks, and we're insulated from that. So we would welcome and drive over to the 324 Chestnut anytime we could. And again, that just is an example of the friendships that were developed. Really close friendships, great times there. And there's some really good stories.
We won't go into those details right
Yeah,
now, but
yeah.
so talk me through the Olympic experience. Gathering in DC
Yeah,
to
yeah,
getting over their opening ceremonies, the games
yeah.
that you played. Give me your highlights for the memories there.
Well, you know, the thing when we made the Olympic team, it life changed. I mean, and that was after Elkhart. We our meal program was much better. We were treated differently by the military. We were Olympians, and so there were things, especially for me in the military. Not everybody was in it, but there were things that they did that made it so much easier. You don't have to be here at 9 in the morning anymore. You know, we expect you to be training, and so it was really the difference was night and day, and it really showed itself when you get to Washington D.C. and check into the Marriott Hotel. It was plush. You know, everything was first class at that point. You get all your your Olympic garb, and they have I won't say parties, but they have cocktail events, and they have buffets, and it was just really nicely done. And we hadn't been treated like that ever, probably, except for Romania. They treated us well, but the village was great. I mean, it's a beautiful. If you remember, it was a beautiful location. They had meals 24 hours a day there. Everything was first class. We were jammed into buildings, in a rooms, 3, 4 in a room, but that didn't bother us. I mean, we were happy just to be going first class. So, it was just a whole different experience at a higher level.
And tell me about the games. You play Hungary first, and that was probably your
Yeah,
worst game.
yeah. You
Talk me
know,
through the succession of games.
well, the thing I realized this not too long ago. I was looking back, knowing that we were going to visit sometime, but the thing that didn't realize that in Munich, the top 9 teams from the 1970 World Championships automatically qualified for Munich. So when you think about it, we didn't pick up the game until the fall of 1970, Fort Bragg. That was the first official gathering. These teams that qualified, the 9 teams, had qualified in the winter of 1970. And they continued to train for 2 years for the Olympic Games, knowing the Olympic Games were coming in 2 years. So these teams, not only had they played, most of them all their life, 6, 7 on, because it's such a huge sport in Europe, but we were playing against teams that were in the top 10 in the world in 1970, and they continued to train. We weren't even formed yet in 19 when they qualified. So when you look back, yeah, Hungary beat us. I think it was 28-15, and they surprised us. We weren't ready for them. We didn't have a scouting report in those days, but it was a good lesson. We knew we'd get better as the games progressed. But Hungary at the time was ranked 8th in the world. We went on to play Japan, who was ranked 10th, and we played Yugoslavia, that was ranked 3rd. And so our bracket was very difficult. We were playing 3 teams that were ranked in the top 10, and Yugoslavia was ranked 3rd at the time. So we lost all 3 games. I'd say we're in them, but Hungary definitely was the one that was probably the most hurtful from the standpoint of we should have done better. Yeah. Then we go on and we play in the cross brackets, and we drew Spain. And even though Spain wasn't a top 10 team, they qualified for the Montreal Olympics. They weren't an automatic qualifier. They, those players in Spain, just like most European countries, they play soccer at age 6 and 7, and they play handball, and they play all their lives. So we were playing against a very good team. Spain was a very good handball team, and we had lost 3 games in a row. So I think Spain, by the time they came to play the United States, they they had a couple losses as well, and I think they overlooked us. I think we caught them by surprise. There wasn't a lot of scouting at that time because we were a new team on the horizon, and so they really hadn't seen USA play much, and we got up on them and shocked them. We got ahead of them. We maintained the score. We played our best game. Played very strong the next game against Denmark as well, but we really played maybe above our head somewhat at times against Spain to get a win. But I remember walking off the court, and there was a friend of mine from Oregon. I didn't know he was there, and I see him to this day. But he saw us walk off, and he just was elated. It's, way to go, and congratulations. And the locker room by far was the happiest moment I've ever experienced in sports. To beat Spain, walk away with a win in Munich, when 16 months prior we didn't even know what the game was all about. Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I'm doing this film. What was your memories of opening ceremonies there?
Everybody asks you that, and it's a question that you think about, and it's a tremendous feeling walking out of the archways onto the field, and you see 100,000 people, and you know that the whole world is watching. There's probably millions more watching. And so it's an unbelievable goosebumps type situation. It really is. You just say, wow, I'm here. And, we look back at Fort Bragg, and this was a dream. We never thought we'd ever be here initially. And so it really hit home. It was a tremendous thrill. But at the same time, I think I got as big a thrill in the actual games, knowing that I was representing the United States against a country in the Olympic Games, and felt so fortunate just to be out on the court playing against Yugoslavia, Japan, Spain, and so I will always look back and say that the opening ceremonies was the highlight of Munich because of the initial thrill coming in onto the field. It really was unbelievable.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And give me your memories of the unfortunate massacre that happened.
Well, I think what was difficult, it happened right next to our building, and we were prevented from even, going anywhere close to where it was happening, of course, at the time, because it was ongoing. But we looked out our balcony and could see the machine guns and the soldiers all over, around downstairs and across the way, probably no more than 75 yards from where we were. So there was initial feeling of fear, because did you really want to walk down there and walk over to the cafeteria not knowing what was out there, because it was ongoing. And it was, initially, you don't know what's happening because the media wasn't on top of it yet. So we certainly didn't know that there were deaths involved, but we did hear shootings. So it was a fear, and it was a feeling then thereafter that I think a lot of us didn't want to play the next game, which was against Spain. But Avery Brundage was absolutely right in saying that the games have to go on. You can't let terrorism stop the games. And so it was just a unbelievable situation to be that close to, and know that you have to play a ball game after that event. The ceremony that was held in the stadium, the memorial, was really moving. A lot of tears.
So let's skip up now to Montreal. Just your brief memories of the difference between your Munich team and your Montreal team.
Well, I've said this to you before. there's two guys that were on the 72 team that we really missed in Montreal. Joe Volker was a tremendous athlete, and we missed him especially on defense. 6'4", Jumpin' Joe was his nickname. He jumped 40 inches in the air. We didn't have him. Joe got married, ended up getting married. Actually, was married when we went to Munich, but he was ready to get into business and left the team. And then Matt Matthews, our left-hander, that was really a good player. So we were missing two of our real key element players. And then we picked up a couple players that were the Randy and Robbie Dean, both basketball, football players at a major, Northwestern and Indiana. But I take that back. They both went to Northwestern, and one played basketball, one played football. They were good athletes, but they had only been playing the game for 6 months. So had they been able to play a little bit longer with us, it would have made a huge difference. But the thing that was difficult there is, in those days they did more scouting, and they figured out ways to stop us, and they were very, very good at double, triple teaming. And so Montreal was more difficult. I feel like we'd been around longer, the USA team. Not only did we play in Munich, but we played in the World Championships in 1974. So teams had a chance to scout, and we had a difficult time. But, great thrill. Great thrill to be there. And.
So over the years, you guys have had one reunion after another, and it seems like you're closer now than maybe you were when you were going through all this stuff. What is, and this is basically your last question.
Okay.
But take as long as you want.
Yeah.
Give me the essence of the camaraderie, the friendship. Why are you still drawn to each other after all these years?
Well, without question, the experience that we went through was so unique. I mean, when you think about all the gatherings that we had together as a team, all the different places we visited, all the difficulties we had initially, just being representative on a team, as a team out playing the Europeans, the grind that we went through, the unbelievable success in qualifying and then going on to Munich. All these things were so unique, and we were all, most of us were in the military, just out of the military, so we all had that experience to draw on, and we all knew how lucky we were to be where we were at the time. And I think as you get older, you look back and you go, some of your best friends are the friends that you spent this time with because of the experience. It was so unique and so unusual to have such a great group of guys. And I will say without question, to the guys, every one of them got along. Every one of them, we ended up all being best friends. And as my good friend Roger Baker says, if there was ever a problem, all you have to do is make a phone call and somebody be there to help them out. And I would agree. Yeah.